what you think the orders of intrusions are. Now, with the dikes, that's relatively simple, except for one relationship. So what's the story people have got so far from the dikes? What's the oldest dike?
Oh. Do you mean for all of the dikes?
Yeah. No.
The north-south dike.
Yeah, so the north-south basalt dike. Okay. I got fancy and told someone this morning to call it the meridional. I can never say it. The meridional dike, the north-south one, which means the same thing. North-south dike's fine. It's only about this wide. It varies a bit, but it gets cut by all of the other dikes. So it gets cut by the microgranite, which is the only thing with K feldspar in it here. It gets cut by basalt. You see that on the outcrop. And it gets cut by the dacite as well. So it gets cut by every other phase of diking. There's some dikes that are just here that are in a very similar orientation. They're north-south as well. We don't see a direct relationship between those and the other dikes, but it would be reasonable to assume on the basis of its orientation that it may have come in, they may have come in roughly the same time as the north-south basalt dike we see over on the eastern side there. There's actually another small one just to the east of the one that most people picked up. It was smaller again, and it was very wandery. It was almost sub-horizontal at one point, but it's probably of the same phase. What's number two?
That's both. We won't know.
Yeah, so the microgranite dike. But do we really know that? What dikes do you see cutting the microgranite? Yeah, you see the later basalt dikes, the ones that are striking about, what are they, about 075? 080, something like that. They cut the microgranite. What you don't see is you don't see the dacite cutting the microgranite. But again, on the basis of orientation, we talked about the orientation of dikes on Monday, and we said that they tend to intrude in an orientation perpendicular to the minimum stress. Okay, so sigma 3. So that will be one of the things that determines their orientation. And sort of based on that, and based on assuming that the stress field is maybe shifting around a bit, you would say that the dacites are pretty close in their timing to the basalts. What about basalt versus dacite? The 080 one. Yeah, which one intrudes which?
Basalt.
Yeah, so at least two places you see the basalt cross-cutting the dacite dikes. So that sorts those out. As I said, the only thing we don't see in our crop, because it's sitting out just in the ocean by about 10 metres, is we don't see dacite cutting microgranite. But it's a reasonable assumption to say that it probably does, because it's parallel to the basaltic dikes. So it's highly likely that it does cut the microgranite, we just don't see it. So you can infer the order of age. You can't say for 100% sure that it does. Okay, so in your report, there's two things that you're asked to address. You're asked to talk about the temporal relationship of the igneous rocks that are here, and that's what I'm going through at the moment. But then you're also asked to address the petrogenetic relationships. Now that's been a big failing in the past in reports. People have faithfully done the temporal relationships, and then they've gone, what the hell does that word mean? And they've just repeated what they've done with the temporal and not given me the next step. Before I get to the petrogenetic relationships, what about, let's step back a bit to the plutonic phases. So we've got, broadly speaking, two major plutonic phases here. We've got the tonalite, which is the stuff we're standing on here, and we've got the diorite, which is there and up here. And you see, as we've come around the platform, we've gone from tonalite to diorite, back to tonalite again, in that little wedge-shaped bit over there, back to diorite again here, tonalite again there, diorite again there. Okay, so it's that sort of pattern around the platform. So what about the order of intrusion of the tonalite and the diorite? what evidence have we got? And evidence is crucial. When you write your report, I don't want you to say, yep, dacite older than basalt. Tell me why. Okay, you see, there's lots of, the enclaves are part of the story. Someone just yelled out inclusions. And that's one way you can distinguish, but that's quite easy to distinguish tonalite from diorite on this platform, because the tonalite's full of these enclaves, which incidentally look fairly similar to the diorite. Contrary to that, in the diorite you see a lot of veining and you see much less of that in the tonalite. What are the veins made of? This all should go into your report. Felsic stuff. Okay. What would it be? It looks similar to the tonalite. Some of it looks almost like quartz veins, but most of it's igneous looking. It looks like, some of them look slightly more felsic. You can look up here, you can see the veins up here running through the diorite just behind you. And it looks a bit more felsic than the tonalite. In fact, it looks a little bit almost like the microgranite. So do you think we can say which ones come in first? Which rocks intruded which?
Tonalite intruded the dacite.
Diorite.
Diorite.
Too many words beginning with D. Why do you say that?
I say that because it's veining through the dolerite. It's veining through the dolerite, so it's actually
Diorite.
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 It's veining
There's
through
no
the
dolerites in, by the way.
It's pulling apart the diorite.
Yeah. And you sort of see that there as well. But if you look behind you, there's some beautiful examples. Al was sitting on a moment. If you look up here, you see, I'll just stand up there. Look up behind you here. How would you describe the contrast between the two? It's an intrusive contrast. In the igneous situation, it's always intrusive. You've got a nice sharp contact. Is it straight? Quite confusing. Straight, quite confusing places. Okay? Yeah, that's the other thing you do notice, is you can notice that the diorite is actually chilled against the tonalite. Now that suggests the opposite. That suggests that the diorite's coming later. Okay? There's also structures up here, I think, out standing on some vessels. In fact, these are sitting on vessels. Beautiful chill margin. Here, the contact is very lobate. Okay, so it's very, there's a nice scientific word called loopy. It's sort of like one of those, what's the word, onomatopoeia. It sort of sounds like what you're seeing there, so you can always see these things sort of mingling and carrying on together. So quench margin, see how much darker that is around there? So the diorite's actually quenching against the tonalite. So we've got conflicting information. Okay, so what does that suggest? Yeah, well, it suggests that they're both magnets at the same time. So the tonalite hasn't come in and quenched against the diorite with the tonalite now I'm doing. The diorite hasn't come in and quenched against the tonalite when the tonalite's been solid. And you can see that by this quandary margin, you get the this injecting up into there. What you're looking at here, and I mentioned this morning, we've got structures that are reminiscent of some of the things that you saw on Tuesday. They're like sedimentary structures. These things here, what can you tell me about dioritic magmas versus tonalitic magmas, or just basaltic versus granitic would do? One's denser. Yeah, so it's sinking. It's like they're low casts. It's exactly the same principle, except you're here in an igneous environment several kilometres down in the crust.
Except they're not symmetrical.
Yeah, true. These back injections of the tonalite back into the diorite are like flame structures. Okay, so you've got the same principles that we worked with the other day, People don't call these things flame structures in load casts, although we know they're doing one thing. But it's exactly the same principle. So you've got quenching there. What about the other differences between, if you've got two magnets coming together, why don't they just mix together? Yeah, viscosity is probably the key one. Okay, obviously the temperature's good, so they're different temperatures, and that's why this is quenching against that. You can see it's finer grain. You see further away from the contact back up here, the diorite gets very coarse. And the person who mapped this over 20 years ago had several different phases of the diorite. The one up there, the spotty diorite, probably enough because it's spotty, you've got these great big unplanned diorite crystals. So this sort of thing's very reminiscent of the sedimentary environment, except we're way down in the crust somewhere. So viscosity is an important thing. So these things, two things don't mix well together because of the viscosity contrast. Which one do you think is more viscous? Okay, so I had a discussion about this with someone. If they were both entirely liquid and they were the same temperature, and that was a question I got asked earlier today, if two granitic magma and a basaltic magma were both at the same temperature, wouldn't they have the same viscosity? Well, no, they wouldn't, because this has got no silicon. Okay, you can see you get those silicate polymers running through magma, which make it more viscous. And the temperatures probably do equilibrate as it's come in and it's been much hotter. But notice that it's quenching. What else is happening? When you're quenching the diorite, what are you doing to it? As a consequence. Lots of crystals. Okay, so you've got a massive amount of crystals all of a sudden. You might only have one little bit of time there, but in fact you might only have 10% double left. Lots of better crystals in the magma ups the viscosity by orders of magnitude. Okay, so maybe in this case here, it may well be that the diorite's actually more viscous than the todolite once the temperature's equilibrated and you've had the quenching effect. This sort of brings me to the enclaves. Now if you look at their contact, that's the contact on that side. Let's have a look at the contact over there. It's a bit more diffuse, it's actually hard to put a finger on. That's a bad smell. So it's pretty much coming through just where this gutter is, and you can see bits of tone light in here. What are these things again? Yeah, and you can see that they're getting, some of them are globular looking, but some of them are getting stretched out in the flow here. And coming back to the sedimentary analogies, if you've got differential flow between these two here, these are basically, if you think about it, look like bits of that. Okay, so there's another sedimentary thing I'm thinking of where you get in turbidites, in fact, where you get turbidite flow come down and it actually digs up pieces of the previous deposit that was there, and you see those previous pieces, these inclusions in the new turbidite deposit. You know what they're called? They've been ripped up, so they're called rip-up clasts. So sometimes you get clasts in the base of a turbidite which are actually been ripped up from the layer underneath. They're also called intraformational clasts, just to throw more terminology at you. But could you sort of see what I'm getting at here? It's these, if you've got flow here, then it's actually plucking off bits of the diorite magma, which is still magmatic, and these are rip-up clasts, and they become enclaves. Notice that I was going to say density, but abundance is a better word. Notice that the abundance of enclaves decreases as you come away from the contact. Okay, there's still a fair amount of them up there, but nothing like here. You've almost got 50% enclave. Up there it's probably 5. Okay, so it's not unreasonable to suggest that these enclaves are actually getting knocked off the edge there by magma flow, not unlike rip-up clasts. Where was I going next with that? The train of thought, which I've just lost. So the origin of these, you can come back down, sit down again if you like. I've got a little bit to go. So the origin of these enclaves has been a little bit controversial in the past. The Igneous people from ANU many years ago, and you'll see several papers by White and Jackal. I think I referenced one in your reference list in there, and I'll actually upload that paper. They describe these things, they don't see them as magma globules. They see them as bits of unmelted material from the source that the tonalite came from. They call it restite. What it's called is fairly irrelevant, but they don't see these as products of magma mingling. Okay, so these things, so the alternate explanation is that they've been derived here. They're caused by mingling of the magmas. The magmas don't mix really well because there's a viscosity contrast. The other option, there is a third origin to these things, that they're actually country rock sediments, so they're actually accidental sediments that have fallen in from the surrounding rocks. And I don't know whether anyone can any, but there's about 3 of them on the platform here. There's actually pieces of them on bottom beds. They're churks that have been turned into quartzites because they've been heated up. So there's 3 or 4 of those around the platform as well, but there's not many. So the more logical explanation, and most people would agree today, that these things are actually a product of the 2 magmas coming into contact and mingling together, but not mixing properly. So then sort of begs, we've still got this issue, but okay, we've said we've got enough evidence really here to say that these 2 things have been magmas at the same time. We still haven't answered the question as to which ones come in first. Any suggestions? Diorite's quenched against the tonalite. I mean, you've got to be careful with that statement because that doesn't necessarily mean that the diorites come in second. It's most likely that the diorites come in second, but the story is actually a lot more complicated than that. Now I've simplified it as harsh years and said tonalite first, diorite second, but that's not strictly correct. Because as you come around, I described that sequence before, as you come around the platform, you go from tonalite to diorite to tonalite to diorite to tonalite to diorite. Okay, so you people have been really keen. I'm impressed with this group. You've really got stuck into it today, and I think more importantly, you've enjoyed it. It's a great experience out here. So I'm going to throw you the more complicated story, and that is, you're getting punished for being. You deserve it. You deserve it. Yeah, that's right. So the more complicated story, and again I'll take you back to the sedimentary environment, is that the order of intrusion is almost exactly what I said just there. You've got a bit of tonalite coming in, then diorite intrudes, then more tonalite comes in, then more diorite, then more tonalite, then more diorite. And our sedimentary structures analogy supports that. Notice on the contact there, we've got rip-up class. So it's like the tonalite's flooded into the magma chamber, the diorite's already sitting there. You get flow and flux off these enclaves. Rip-up class is the sedimentary analogy. You may even have structures that look like scour. Can't say I've seen any there, but scour one is difficult because you're dealing with 2 liquids really, at least 2 partial liquids. Then you've got another diorite comes in, and you've got these lode cast structures on the underside of the diorite. Now, if you look around at the contacts, and I showed a few people over there, the contacts between the 2 aren't vertical here. They're actually dipping that way. It's a bit hard to determine in some places, but it's pretty steep, but they're actually dipping back towards Churros Head. it's a magma chamber where you've had successive inflow from underneath of tonalite and diorite. There's a paper about it called mafic and silicic layered intrusions. They call it, it's the Masley theory or Masley hypothesis. So Masley means mafic and silicic layered intrusions. Okay, so you can't really say that diorite has come in first or tonalite's come in first because it's been a succession of one after the other and it keeps repeating. Down at Chiros Heads, you see the same thing. It's on a bit of a finer scale, but they're actually dipping back this way. So you've got like a saucer-shaped intrusion. Again, we're talking kilometres down into the crust, but you've got successive intrusions of silicic, or felsic is a better word, felsic, then mafic, then more felsic, and a bit more mafic. Okay? They haven't come up at the same time necessarily. There's just been successive intrusions. So it's a complicated story. It's not an easy one to nut out. You people will get 4 hours here. Okay, but that's the bigger picture. So I guess to simplify that down, there's ambiguity in the order of intrusion. And to come up with a story like that, I think that the sedimentary analogy, you've got these sedimentary-like structures, they support this successive intrusion story. So not all the tonalite you see on the platform here has come in at the same time. There's been successive, it's been a repetitive process of one followed by the other. The final part of that picture then is you're asked about petrogenetic relationships. Are the magmas here all related to one another by an igneous lineage? Let's try that again. A lineage. So by that I mean, by an igneous lineage I mean pretty much fractional crystallisation. You learnt back in first year, Bowen's reaction series and so on, that mafic magmas can in theory fractionate out to felsic magmas. So you can actually get a granite from a basaltic liquid simply by dropping out early crystallising phases like epoxies and so on, and then your remaining liquid becomes more felsic and you can end up with a granite. Does anyone remember the problem with that last year, at least in the arc setting? What's the relative proportions? Basaltic magmas versus granitic magmas in arcs, or at least in continental arcs.
20%?
Which one? Yeah, well not even that. If you look at the Andes, there's almost no basaltic magmas there at all. There's a lot of intermediate stuff, but it's all along that western side of the Americas, the arc, the Cascadia arc and everything else, the felsic magmas way outweigh 20 to 1 higher than the mafic magmas. So if you're going to appeal to fractional crystallisation, getting your granites from your basaltic liquids, you've got a major volume problem. Because if you fractionate a magma, you end up with less of it. Here we've ended up with more of it. Okay, so you can't really appeal to fractionation. The other really simple way to think about it is, where do basaltic magmas come from? And you can consider the diorites here in that class, so that both the diorites and the basaltic dikes, where do they come from? Say again? Crust or mantle? Mantle. Okay, so they come from the mantle. Where do the tonalites come from? From the dacites. They're related as well. Put very simply, the diorites are the plutonic equivalents of the basaltic dikes. The tonalites, I should say that the other way around. The basaltic dikes are the subvolcanic equivalent of the diorites. The dacitic dikes are the subvolcanic equivalent of this stuff. They're very similar in composition. So where do the tonalites come from? Granitic magmas, not the mantle. They have to come from the crust because of that volume problem. So they may have a mantle component in them, but dominantly they're derived by melting of pre-existing crustal rocks. And for that reason, because you've got a big variation in crustal composition, you get a lot of different types of granites, which we won't enter into that discussion here. So How do you, the next thing to try and link that together is how do you melt the crust? What's the best way to melt something? Heat it up. How do you heat the crust up? Well, we're not in a hotspot setting though. What sort of setting are we in? We're in an arc, so we're in a continental arc, or continental arc.
Water?
Someone said the right thing, not water. Not pressure. You've only got. Well, you can't really do that with the. Well, that's one of the ways that you can melt mantle. You can decrease the pressure. Remember, we want to heat it up. We said we've got mafic magmas coming from the mantle. That's the best way to heat it up. Someone probably said that and I didn't hear. Okay, so you've got, think of this as a dynamic system. You've got, you're in an arc setting, you've got a mantle wedge there that's melting your mafic magmas. The mafic magmas are coming up into the lower crust. They're heating it up. In response, the lower crust starts to melt. That gives you the tone lines. Okay, so they're related by energy, if you like, but they haven't come from the same source. One has not been derived from the other.